All right, I'd like to welcome you to another edition of the Coach Pius Media class. Remember that in our last class, we defined the news, we talked about news criteria, we talked about the characteristics of the news, and we also talked about the news markers or the checklist of the news. Now, in order not to bore you with all of this, I have all these uploaded in my various social media platforms, particularly the YouTube. So if you go there, you will see the news definition. You will also see the news characteristics. You will also see the news checklist. And I promised you that because of the length of that particular topic or the size of the topic called news or the volume, whichever way you want to look at it, the news is a very wide concept. And so I told you that we're going to look at other concepts of the news in our subsequent classes. There is what you call the news criteria. What you can say determines what becomes news to you as a news editor, as a reporter, and as a news producer, whichever role you play. These are what we call the news criteria. And that's going to be one of our focuses for today, as it were. Now, like I said, the news criteria simply means the determinants of news. Okay, and there are quite a number of them. We talked about timeliness the other time when we discussed characteristics of the news, and if you recall, I told you that we are still going to meet the concept of timeliness when we are talking about the news criteria. So, timeliness is the very first one. For whatever story to pass as news, it must be timely, both in terms of its characteristics and in terms of its criterion as news. If it is not timely, it is not news. Of course, we discussed the concept of timeliness to mean um, immediacy, okay, to mean urgency, and those terms that have to do with timeliness. So, for instance, if an event happened 3 days ago, or even yesterday, or even 2 hours ago, it has lost some element of timeliness, except, of course, if the event has not been reported by other platforms. If such events have already been reported by other platforms, then it has lost every element of timeliness. Okay, so if you are now reporting the same story, you are now reporting as a second-hand information or even third-hand in some cases. And as a good news platform and as a good news editor as well, you don't allow that to happen. That's why every news platform makes attempts to be the first to break the news. That is where the issue of timeliness comes in. If it is not timely, it's not news, and therefore it's not a newsworthy event. That said, another important criterion that determines what becomes news is prominence. What do we mean when we talk about prominence? Now, prominence has more to do with who is involved in the news and how influential is that person. There is no way the office of a governor, for instance, will be as prominent as that of a president when it comes to issues that have to do with the news. What I'm saying in essence is that when the president of a country is involved in something compared to when a councillor is involved in the same thing, definitely you will give more attention to that subject when the president is involved. That is what prominence is about. Dealing with issues in the news based on who is involved. And I give a very good example. If today you see Mr. Pius in the market buying stuff for his wife, like, a commoner that he is, maybe carrying a bag, going from one store to another, buying items for soup or rice or whatever the wife wants to cook. I mean, you see it as normal. It's not a big deal, okay? It's not a big deal, right? But the same cannot be said if the president of a country is involved. It will definitely make news. That the president had to go to the market, be seen in the market buying stuff for the wife, of course, it's unheard of. Now, for some reporters, it will pass for comic relief. There are people who will commend the president's humility, simplicity, and all of that. There are some, however, who will lambast the president for going too low for his office. Now, it's not a question of whether he got praised or whether he got criticized. It's a question of that action being in the news because of the prominence of the president. But let's take even something closer home to drive home my point when it comes to prominence, so that you'll be able to have a discretion when you find yourself in a situation where you need to write a story in the same event that has a chairman, a governor, and a president, and the three of them making speeches. I've seen a lot of young reporters who probably will want to start their story based on who spoke first. Okay, but if you are an experienced journalist, this principle of prominence tells you that in such a circumstance, the president is more prominent than the governor, and it trickles down to the chairman and indeed the councillor. So it doesn't matter who spoke first or who spoke last. The fact that the president is more prominent than these other officers I just mentioned, it means that his story has to take the lead because of the prominence. Now, these are the things that determine how you even approach your story in the first place. That also means that if you don't have enough space to capture the three of them, it means that the president's story must go first. And then later on, subsequently, you can start capturing the stories of others. If you have a way of ensuring you are able to squeeze the three of them, based on hierarchy, the president will always come first. That is what makes the news at that point in time. When the president and the governor speak on the same subject, the president makes the news much more than the governor. And so it continues along the ladder of hierarchy. So prominence is very key when it comes to news determinants. Another very important concept is proximity. Proximity simply means nearness to the news. Okay? The nearer the field of happening is, the more newsworthy the event becomes. Take for instance, if there's a serious car accident in Washington, D.C., for example, and you are somewhere in Lagos State, Nigeria. I mean, car accident happening in Washington, D.C. will not really make as much news to you, will not really make as much meaning to you as if that accident happened in Lagos where you live. So it becomes a stronger news reporting an accident that happened in Lagos than the one that happened in DC, that is Washington, DC. Reason being that people are more likely to be interested in what is closer to them than what is far away from them, because they are more likely to be impacted by what is closer to them than what is far away from them. And that's why, as an editor, a lot of times when you write your stories, you realize that a lot of important things happen in different places of the world, but you find out that you are more attracted, even as an editor, to things that happen around your vicinity, around your country, around your state where you are, around the local government you are, because the people who are following you, the people who are reading you, are more likely to be from that location. But also because the world is a global village, at some level, we see the world also, when I mean the world, now I'm talking about the international community, as being relatively proximal. Because today you could easily just scroll through your phones and you read what is happening across the world. So, to that extent, that is why we have what we call foreign stories. Okay? Because even though it's not geographically close to you, technology has made it very close to you. And that's why whatever is happening in the US today, or in China, or in Russia, one way or the other, those of us here in Nigeria, of course, we are affected. And because we are affected, we are concerned. So in a way, technology has made countries proximal. But even at that, the discretion is that you still need to give higher percentage of coverage to things that are happening around you than things that are happening in faraway places of the world. Now, another important one is conflict. Anything controversial always makes the news. Anything controversial. And that's why you see that controversial personalities are always in the news. Here in Nigeria, for example, if you have been following the man called newsroom, for some reason, he has always been in the middle of political controversies. If it is not with the PDP, it is with the governor, it is with one personality or another, okay? Or he's calling press conference to talk about one thing that has happened. No, at any point in time, there is always controversy where Wike is. And so such kind of people naturally generate news because people are more interested in things that have to do with controversy. And that's where the issue of conflict comes in. When we talk about conflict now, it's not just necessarily about disagreement. It's about controversy. Of course, it's about things happening that are likely to cause disturbance in the society as well. Okay, disagreements that are likely to cause disturbance. That's what is called conflict. So any such kind of stories sell a lot. Another personality that has been seen as having been controversial also is the man called El-Rufai. Okay, a lot of people don't even understand who he is. As many people as will tell you that El-Rufai is a bad person, you would also have as many telling you he's a good person. So when those kind of people appear in maybe on television stations or on radio, they are likely to draw more attention and they make the news. Either because they are very blunt, just something makes them controversial. Okay? And that's the conflict that we are talking about here. Another very important one is what you call human angle stories. Stories that have to do with human emotions, stories that involve humans, usually in the negative form. Like, oh, there is fire incident now, a lot of people have lost their property to fire. It's a human angle story, it becomes of interest. Oh, a lot of people have died in an accident. Anything that has to do with our life, our stories, occurrences that have to do with humans, those are human angle stories. They are bound to generate, emotional reactions, and they also form very interesting stories. Another one is the unusualness or rarity. This one is the heart of the news itself. Because if you remember our definition of news, we said news is like upsetting the status quo. Okay? That's why we said when the dog bites a man, it's not news. But when the man bites the dog, it becomes news. Because news is like upsetting the status quo. The unusual, that is the news. So whatever is unusual, for instance, if you wake up in the morning, the usual thing from, let's say, 6 a.m. is to see daylight, right? And as the day keeps breaking, it gets even clearer. But when you now wake up at 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m., and everywhere still gives you a picture of, say, 10 p.m. or 11 p.m., then that's a major news, because it probably has never happened before, or it probably is very rare, and it's most likely not to happen. But if it now happens, it becomes news. So many things. For instance, you wake up when you don't have any ocean nearby or sea. You now see hippopotamus just in the middle of the city. I mean, it becomes news. But if you see a dog, it's a norm. That won't be news. So what this tells you is that rarity or unusualness is something of interest and must captivate your interest as an editor. Another one is currency. That's another criterion of news. Your news must be current, just like we talked about timeliness the other time. All these happenings I've talked about, they have to be current. Okay, so it's a strong determinant of news. Whether it is timely, whether it is prominent, whether it is proximal, that is near, there has to be an element of currency in it, which is timeliness. If it is not current, it's not news. All these things can happen, but everybody has heard, so it's no more current. It has passed. It's no more news. So that element of currency must be there. Must be in your subconscious at any point in time you are preparing the news. So now this is audience affinity. If in that situation, if you are writing anything about Two-Face or Davido or Aki and Popo or any of these legends, it makes news. That is why you hear that anything about these celebrities, because the audience can relate with it. Okay, they're inevitable in your story. So I hope that we've been able to throw light to some of these things that you probably have been glossing over without really knowing that they matter a lot in news writing. That's the essence of what we're trying to do. So next time, as a news person, that you want to sit down and compile your stories, kindly bear this criteria in your mind, without which definitely whatever you are going to be writing will not be newsworthy. Thank you for listening. See you in the next class. But please don't forget to subscribe to Coach Pius Media Class, okay, on my YouTube page. Thank you.